idea. Thibault also came up with a concept that became very important to Bill, what was called the deflation of ego at depth. Bill Wilson was once asked years later if there was a shortened version of what Alcoholics Anonymous meant. And he said, let me see if I can remember this right, he said that a person, alcoholic, has to have a painful and traumatic experience. Second, they had to stay in the pain for the deflation of ego at depth, this idea of suppressing one's ego. Third, they had to choose humility. And fourth, they had to ask for help. And that those were the four ingredients of recovery. So Thibault helped Bill understand this idea of surrender, of moving away from egocentric, of moving away from what we would now call empowerment, really. But Bill was evangelistic, and Bill wanted to go help other people. And so he went out and grabbed drunks. There's just no, he would find guys in bars and on the street, and he would bring them home. And there are lots of fairly notorious stories about him snagging alcoholics in New York City and bringing them back to his, let's skip ahead, bringing them back to here, 182 Clinton Street, their apartment with his wife Lois, his long-suffering wife Lois. And he would bring drugs, they'd stay at his house. And there, like I say, there are some fairly notorious stories. I believe at least 2 people died in his apartment. 2 alcoholics died in his apartment. They hit on Lois. They puked on his furniture. They robbed him. It was just terrible. And no one, and I mean no one, got sober. Not one. And for 6 months he did this. And it just brought, poor Lois, who had watched her husband decline into his alcoholism for years and years and years, and had, really run their life into the ground. Now her husband got sober, and this was the result. He was bringing worse drunks than him home. And eventually, he finally despaired. He finally got to the point where he realized that this was going nowhere. And this is one of those stories where we were talking about it before we started. There are stories about Alcoholics Anonymous that appear to be apocryphal. There occasionally are stories about Alcoholics Anonymous that appear to be apocryphal that later it turns out are true, this is one of them. Because Bill Wilson eventually went to Lois and said, this isn't working, and I put you through enough, and I'm not going to do